Good morning, everybody. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Michelle Lipinski from Northshore Recovery High School. I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. So a few months ago, I read a book called The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. And so it had some quite horrific tales of fentanyl and meth, but it also had tales of hope within that those horrific tales. And one of the tales they told was the tale of Northshore Recovery High School in, I think they said Danvers, Massachusetts, but it's really in Beverly, Mass. And I said, I know where that is. And it triggered in my mind. I remember seeing in the Salem News, when high schools have their graduations, there's always a mention of, there was, the speaker was such and such for blah, 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 and there were so many grads. And there was this just recent, last time there was the Northshore Recovery High School graduation. And I said, what is that school? So anyway, I, from the book, realized that this sounds really, really interesting as a model of how to address the epidemic we are in terms of substance abuse, particularly as it relates to teenagers. And for me, it does seem that we have a God who doesn't give up on us. And what does it mean for us as folks in relationship with others to not give up on folks who a lot of people have given up on? And so, and I think Michelle has built an institution that does such a thing. So I reached out to Michelle, wondered if she would be willing to come and talk about how she got there, what she does, and then the high school. And we met, and she said yes. So she's here this morning, and I'm really delighted that she is. And so please give Michelle a Christchurch welcome.
It's a man that wears many hats, apparently. I go help in the nursery. I'm not in front of the person I would rather sit and just chat with you, but I didn't realize we're Facebook Live, so here we are. So I'm not sure, I did have a video that I was going to show this morning. However, it felt really, really heavy. And a year ago this week, not that I'm about to get really heavy because I just said I wasn't going to show the video. A year ago this week, we lost 3 students in 1 week. We lost a 16-year-old who died by suicide, she hung herself. And then we lost a 27-year-old who died of an overdose, and then a 21-year-old who died of an overdose. So I had to eulogize 3 students in a week, which we've lost 34 students in the past 16 years. However, this was a new thing for me. So this has been a really tough week for me. So I think that's why I kind of put that aside. Like, I don't really want to watch that because I kind of live that every day. So long story short, I'm an educator. And I got to know some of you are educators as well, so thank you. And I was a biology teacher and a chemistry teacher, taught some health classes. And then I was in Salem High. I was working at Salem High right down the road. And back in 1998, 99, we implemented something called an attendance policy. And I'm one of those teachers. I love the kids in the back of the rooms, the ones that are falling asleep, the ones that come and smell like weed. Those are my people. So I would always teach from the back of the class, right? So I would always go back there and tousle their little heads and be like, come on, wake up, trying to teach photosynthesis here, because everyone needs to know about photosynthesis, the Krebs cycle. So I would just always teach from the back of the class. And so those are the kids who are most affected by the attendance policy that we implemented, where if you miss more than 3 days a quarter, you fail. You get an administrative failure. No matter how competent you are, you can be the most brilliant human, but if you miss more than 3 days, you fail. Well, that just seems archaic. That felt like, just like, look, we're shooting our wounded. These are the kids who can't get to school because of God knows what's happening in their lives, right? Whether their parents are not getting them up in the morning, whether they've worked late the night before, whether they had to get their little brother and sister on the bus. These are children who can't get to school on time, who can't make it into school. And so we're literally shooting the wounded in the back of the classroom. So at the end of that school year, I ended up failing 61% of my students. Of course, I got a call from the principal, and he's like, you need to come and change your grades. So I was like, then why do we have a policy? Like, what is it that we're doing that we're just trying to keep these students out of school? Because these are the perfectly competent students. So I begged and pleaded to start an alternative school in Salem, Massachusetts in 99, 2000. And my principal at the time wonderful man, but when I said I really want to start an alternative school because I really saw a lot of kids just kind of leaving the school. And when I say leaving, that was before No Child Left Behind was fully being implemented. So kids would just stop showing up. Like it was the Wild West of teaching if you taught in the 80s and 90s. And kids just stopped coming and we didn't do anything about it. So I was like, well, we need to think differently. So I started talking to the Department of Education and I said, what is an alternative school? What are the tenets of an alternative school? How can I build one? So I kind of got some information about it. I went to my principal. My principal was like, oh no, we're not going to lose you to those kids. Well, of course, that just puts a fuel under my fire. And I was like, those kids? Like, there are kids. Like, those are people that I love. And so, of course, I went over his head, went to the superintendent, Dr. Herb Levine at the time. And principals really love it when you go over their head, by the way. So I don't recommend it, but I tend to beg forgiveness before I ask permission a lot. So he said, yes, you have my blessings. I kind of gave him the statistics. I said, these are the students that we can help. These are the students who are most at risk of academic social failure, and we need to build a place for them. So went back to my building principal at the time, who put me in this small engine room with about 200 small engines and 5 felons, and I was like, okay, I can do this. So I grew the school from 5 to 80, and in about 2006, 2007, I had a lot of connections in the community. They helped me really build up a bunch of other programs that we had, just socially networking, getting them employment, working with the YMCA, working with all these other organizations, so my students were really thriving. And so back in 2003, 2004, so first of all, let me back up a tiny bit. My superintendent said, do what you need to do, get them to graduation, do not end up on the front page of the Salem Evening News. Kind of in that order, okay? Get them to graduation, get them what they need, don't end up on the front page of the news. Okay, 2004, I'm seeing the faces of my students change dramatically, right? I don't know what's happening. I'm like, why are they falling asleep so much? What is going on? And lo and behold, I search backpacks all the time. I'm constantly running people's backpacks and searching them because they bring stupid stuff to school. So I had a drawer full of like knives and weed, and so I was like, whatever. So this one little, I'll call him Danny. I said, Danny, I don't know what's going on with you. Give me a backpack. And he was like, no. Like, kids always give me their backpacks because they know I'm not going to call the police. I'm just going to take it. We're going to have a discussion, go back to class. Unless it's something egregious, but it never was. It's like spray paint and reuniting. So anyway, so long story short, this kid wouldn't give me his backpack. And I was like, damn. So I go, come on, let's go have a chat. And he threw his backpack at me and started running. I was like, well, that's just strange behavior. So I opened the backpack, and lo and behold, there's these unmarked pill bottles. I don't know what this is. I've never seen this. I open it up. So I call Detective Baglione, who's the school resource officer in Salem, and he comes over and he was like, oh. And the next thing you know, there's 5 squad cars, DEA, all at every squad car ever, and all I keep hearing in my head is my superintendent going, don't end up on the front page of the Salem Evening News. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to stop this. So that is when I found out what OxyContin was. And that kind of changed the trajectory of how I started looking at the students. When I was like, what's the matter with you? I started looking at them and saying, what's happening to you? What is happening to you? And that was when a bunch of my girls were practicing some really unfavorable behaviors, coming in, and I was checking people for track marks. So I go, people started passing away, their parents, their siblings, and so I go to my superintendent at that time, Dr. Herb Levine still, and every graduation, right, time of joy and time to really celebrate, I would bring prayer cards. So I was that person at graduation. I'd be like, here you go, Dr. Levine. He'd be like, why do you keep doing this? I'm like, because I'm living in the trenches and nobody's seeing me. And mind the way, I was also doing a bunch of research at that time about what OxyContin was and what was happening down in Kentucky and West Virginia and these other towns where it was just really owning and disowning a lot of these adolescents. It tended to be younger 20-year-olds, but it was kind of creeping into the schools as well. And so I was like, we got to get ahead of this. And I was trying to join every task force that I could to try to learn more about what we can do for these adolescents because I am in it, right? I'm in it. And mind you, I have a couple of graduate degrees, and no one ever said you're going to have to be checking students for track marks as they walk into your school, right? So me and my staff are, we're in it. We're trying to help everybody, but they're dropping like flies. So Lo and behold, my superintendent at that time, Dr. Herb Levine, came out about his son's addiction, who happened to be a Peabody baseball player, and these are the kids who went to the World Series when they were 12 years old. And so he saw it in his own room. He came to me and he said it was his worst day, and I like to say it was one of my best, because I realized I now had an ally in the fight who actually understood what I was dealing with. And it was great for me, because then we were trying to find ways to solve this. And so at that time, Governor Mitt Romney, Lieutenant Governor Carrie Healy, were also listening to a lot of the EAP, the fire and the police down in Boston, whose children were getting addicted and getting sent out to places like Minnesota. And in Minnesota, they had these schools called recovery schools. So they were like, we need to start one of those. So we went, found legislation, we went ahead and passed legislation. I started the first recovery school in Massachusetts back in 2006. Mind you, I don't even know what a recovery school is, right? There's no handbook. There's no like, oh, this is what you do. And I was like, okay, so what am I doing? And so I made every mistake ever in the book of all books of recovery schools. And because I didn't like, it was a really strict model. And they were like, you just gotta kick them out if they're using. I was like, this doesn't feel good, right? You gotta make them go to 12-step meetings, which are great for some people, but not for adolescents who are easily preyed upon. And I mean, there's a million things we need to put in front of these children, and none of them were in this like playbook of how to start an alternative school for students who are struggling with substance uses. So anyway, so lo and behold, I started this school back in 2006, and we're going along nicely. And then back in 2015 is when fentanyl came, right? I had students who were struggling with heroin. I had students who were struggling with a lot, but you know, underlying, we all know it's trauma. We're all dealing with trauma. In the meantime, my staff and I were going through countless hours of trauma training and how to work with adolescents who have significant trauma, intergenerational substance use. All of those things are reasons that kids are coming to school and presenting the way they're presenting has nothing to do with their substance use. It has everything to do with their environment and what has happened to them. And so, long story short, 2015 hits, and that's when fentanyl came, and that's when this all went south. And I was just saying earlier, I was trying to keep it light. Maybe keeping it light is like everyone else's darkest day. We've lost 34 students. And so I've gone to 34 funerals of kids in caskets. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't walk away from it. And I can't not be a voice for those children who are voiceless. And so, so back in 2017, 2018, there was a young man, his name was Parker Fish, and he went to Endicott College, and he was in their photography program, and he had one of his roommates at Endicott College who got kicked out for heroin use. And he said, I really want to come and visit your school. I want to do my senior project on adolescent recovery. And I was like, well, good luck with that, because I don't even know what that means. And so he came, and he did this 20-minute kind of montage video project. And he showed it to his class and his professor. And his professor happened to be Steve Liss. And Steve saw this montage of these beautiful, I mean, my students are beautiful, and they're smart, and they're intelligent, and they're worth every effort that we can put in front of them. They're not less than. And so, anyway, he did this montage in such a way that it was really enlightening and beautiful. And the words that come out of my students' mouths are so insightful and hard, and they're hard to hear. And so Steve Liss, the professor, comes up to me. He said, can we meet? Sure. He comes over to the school, and he said, I think there's a bigger story here. And I said, oh, okay, let's talk. And I was thinking I wouldn't mind doing a documentary, because I do a lot of public speaking, and I thought it would be great to show people how we treat children with empathy, compassion, radical love. And we do love our students, and we tell them that. And it would be great to show the world how we can treat children who are vulnerable, and how we can help them get through one of the darkest days that they have. And if you've ever seen anyone who's struggling with addiction, it's one of their darkest days. So I said, okay, so let's just go ahead and talk about what that would look like. And I'm thinking it's like an hour and a half documentary. It's gonna be shown at like some obscure film festival in Utah, not even Utah, like Idaho, like South Dakota, like the smallest state, nobody's gonna see it, 12 people, but when I can show people how my staff, because my staff are amazing, how my staff work with these children, our children, and I think the world needs to see it. So he was in there videotaping a lot, thousands of hours, and part of the process, apparently, is when you put a video out to be picked up by a film festival or, I don't know, somebody, anyone can pick it up. So, you know, Steve is out there like hustling to try to get somebody to pick it up so we can go to some, whatever, get the rest of the film made, because that's what they do. They pay to have it made, and then you go, whatever, show it. So I get a call. I'm in my office. Steve is like, I have some good news and I have some bad news. I don't know about you guys, but I like the bad news first, okay? Because I'd rather lead with the bad and then I have the good. And he goes, oh, well, well, the bad news is the good news. I go, oh, okay, Steve, tell me what it is. He goes, well, the show got picked up. And I was like, okay, well, that's good because it's a compelling story. In my eyes, I think it's a compelling story. And he goes, I go, so what's the bad news? He goes, MTV picked it up. And I go, what? Like MTV? Like I used to like be in basements in the 1980s watching videos MTV? Like, what? MTV picked, like, are they still running? Like, I don't even, yeah. So I was like, okay, MTV picked it up. And I go, what are they gonna do with it? And they go, they want to run a mini-series. And I was like, this is not gonna end well. Because, you know, there's a lot that went on in my school in that school year. And there's a lot, on my head it's just flashing like a Rolodex. Like you don't even know what a Rolodex is because I'm old. But back in the day, you used to have everyone's phone numbers on this thing, and that's how my memory works. And it like brings up all these, like, oh crap, oh that happened, oh people can't see that. And I'm thinking of all the stuff that was filmed, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, MTV's gonna get a hold of it and they're gonna shut my school down, right? So lo and behold, I did work with MTV. Steve worked with MTV, and they were only able to get the footage that we gave them. They didn't have access to all of our footage, thank you. And they came out with a 4-part miniseries, which was, you know, it had a lot of music and whatever. I think it accurately portrayed who we are. I think it accurately portrays what we do, but the story was still kind of lost in like the grandiosity of, you know, making MTV. And then of course they called it 16 and Recovery. So there was that because they had that whole series of 16 and Pregnant. So they thought, oh, we'll just call it that, 16 and Recovering. So anyway, long story short, I was gonna bring a 15-minute video of that. And if you want to, I believe it was sent out somehow. Did anyone see it? Oh, look at one person saw it. What did you think?
Here, just from them. They're so honest, they're so vulnerable.
The children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we came out in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, which everyone really needed that lightheartedness in the middle of the pandemic. Let's show children dying. Okay, there we go. So anyway, so it kind of fell flat. But I think some people saw this, and I did get a ton of really great feedback and a ton of not so good feedback. But mostly positive, about how to work with adolescents in a different way, about how not to work with punitive measures, punitive policies, how we need to really start rethinking the way that we treat adolescents who struggle with addiction. I have since also started back in 2019, I started a program where I'm working with 12 local districts, and it's called Positive Alternatives to Student Suspension. And so I don't work with Hamilton Wenham. I do have Hamilton Wenham students at my school, by the way. So it doesn't like stop in certain areas and go like, oh, I can't go there. Addiction just doesn't have any boundaries. So long story short, I started something called Positive Alternatives to Student Suspension with the YMCA and JRI. And instead of suspending students now, they can have a student who has an infraction, mostly substance use. About 65% of the students are being suspended for vaping, nicotine, or marijuana. And they come there and they get interventions. And they don't have to call it a suspension, they call it treatment because they're meeting with a counselor. And the counselor is able to give them 5 different assessments. They give them an anxiety assessment, a depression assessment. They give them an ACEs, which is for childhood trauma. And they give them an SI for suicide ideation. So they get assessments. And these students walk out of these assessments and they go, wow, nobody's ever asked me these questions before. They are learning. 68% of these students are scoring significantly in one of these 5 assessments. And now they're like, wow, I thought I was broken. I really am struggling with anxiety. Or I'm struggling with depression. Or I have, a 7 on an ACEs score out of 12. I have trauma. What I'm doing is a manifestation of a disability I didn't even know I had. So I think it's just really important to find these ways in our communities to address this in so much more of a positive way. Because then they can go back to their communities. We do a great restorative plan to get them back to their communities to reenter positively. We make them identify people in the community and at the school where they can reintegrate in a more safe way. And who are the people, if you feel like you're going to, smoke weed, or you feel like you're going to recommit some type of a behavior, who are the people to talk to? And how can I get you more information? And so we've also connected about 48% of them to some type of therapy, family therapy, individual therapy, mentoring, therapeutic mentors. We've also been hooking them into services that are available at their fingertips because, thank goodness, for the pandemic, we can now do telehealth, and it's normal. Not like 3 years ago when it was like not normal to do telehealth. Now we can identify places where they could do telehealth. And so we're linking them into services so they don't have to have such a rocky path ahead of them. That's kind of where I am. That's who I am. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing. I didn't bring anything with me. It's funny because someone's like, do you have a card? I go, no, I don't have a card. If you want to know more about, you can just look at Northshore Recovery High School. We do have a website. It's pretty comprehensive. And what's great, back in 2000, when I opened the school, here's the story. I feel like I can't walk around. I'm such a walk-arounder, and I don't even know what that means. But I have a sinus infection. Promise, 8 times tested, no COVID. So anyway, what I was about to say, I don't even know what I was about to say. Do you guys have questions? Before I just, yes.
Michelle, could you give us an anonymous story of a person coming into at the very beginning? Introduce us anonymously, whether it's generic or whatever. Just the stories that you've seen. What happens when they come into your place?
Thank you. What you asked was, can you tell a story of how it feels to kind of reintegrate into my community from another place? It's the same story every single time. It's the same story. I come in and there's a guardian or a parent and the student is sitting in front of me and saying to me, nobody sees me. Nobody sees me. And if they do see me, I get bullied because of my substance use. And people make fun of me. And they don't see me. There's so many stories of like a student sitting in a classroom and this person may or may not have been under the influence of a substance, and they'll go and they'll pass out an assessment and they'll just look at that person and go, not only are they not seen, they're not seen. Like they almost are a non-person. So by the time they come to me, they have so much trauma and they feel like they've been so bullied, whether real or perceived, that's how they feel. And the parent usually backs it up with some stories that they have of their own, of that child. A lot of them have tried to take their own lives multiple times, and they've been to treatment, most of them, multiple times, which has been a good and sometimes not so good outcome. And here's how I can tell whether or not that student will be a good fit to my so we're a small school, right? There's 50 students. It's not that big, 14 staff members. And it looks different because our classrooms look different because we're all trauma informed. All of our seats face the door to make sure if there's a loud noise, nobody's gonna have to have a trauma response because they're also used to loud noises. So long story short, you walk through and it's painted differently. It's a softer, gentler way to be a school. And my staff, they hug people, right? So at any given time, you see kids getting hugged, and you see music playing gently, and you see diffusers with aromatherapy, and you see just things that you just don't see in a typical school. It's just a softer, gentler, trauma-informed way. So some people might look at it and they may be like, oh, what is this cult, right? And so those people are like, I need traditional school, not gonna work. 9 times out of 10, the students who present with the ways that I was telling you, go like, sign me up. Like, this is exactly what I need. And so by the time they're done with my interview, and so what I say to them, every single time, I say to every single parent or guardian, I said, I wish I could take your child right now and clone them. Send one back to Hamilton, and keep one with us. and see what that trajectory would be, because I don't know what their substance use is going to look like in 3 years. I really don't know if it's going to get better, if it's going to get worse. I don't know. But your child who has already significantly been impacted by depression or anxiety or substance use, I can't stop this train. But what I can do is make sure that they're loved, and I can make sure that they get their graduation requirements, and I can make sure they get them in a way that is going to work for them, and I'm not going to put them in a box, and we're going to love them. And like I told you, I've lost a lot of students, and every single time, that parent, I'm usually the third or fourth call, right? I'm so-and-so, is getting taken out in a body bag, and I need you to come to my house because you know how to do this, Michelle. So I'm at their houses, and I'm navigating these really murky waters with them because they know now that I am not going to give up on them, right? So it's different. It's like I didn't learn that in grad school, by the way. But nobody ever blames us. In fact, it's the opposite. They're like, will you please say some words at my child's funeral because you knew him better than anybody. You knew her better than everybody. And can you please explain, you kept him on this earth longer than they would have ever been on this earth. So I don't know if that explains anything of what you just asked. But they are to come to us with a pretty, grim story.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah.
And Michelle, here's a 16-year-old girl. She's been taunted. She's the ugly kid of her family and bullied, and she's been sexually abused by a cousin. And she's cutting herself, and she comes into you, and she's self-medicating, and she's hung up, and she comes in. It must be an incredible process before she can begin to even start to say I'm somebody.
That's incredibly insightful because that in and of itself is the story. That's the story of the children I serve. And we do a lot of peeling back of layers to try to figure out if we can get to the core and help start to heal that core. There's a lot of healing that goes on, especially with what you just said. There's a lot of past sexual trauma, there's a lot of past physical trauma, there's a lot of bullying. I have a student who didn't talk for an entire year. She sat in the hallway for an entire year. And I was like, you gotta trust the process. My staff are like, you can make her go to college. No. Hey, acknowledge her, pat her on the head. She doesn't like to be touched. Pat her on the head. I see you. You doing okay today? Great. Keep going. Every single day, they're like, are you gonna do something? No. We're just gonna acknowledge her. We're gonna feed her. We're gonna make sure she's safe. She sat, literally, it was like 10 feet outside my office every single day on the floor, just sat there. Like, okay. That was 2 years ago. This year, she's a senior. She's flourishing. She goes to her classes. She's preparing for college. She has a job. You just have to trust the process. You can't force the process. When you take that child and you put them in a traditional school, there are rules and procedures and policies that child will get left behind. But we have to trust the process. And that process is unconditional love, support, empathy, compassion. That's it. There is no judgment. There is not one child that presents at my school that feels judged. They don't. They walk in and they feel it and they're like, oh, I have students who are trans, I have students who are gay, I have students, it just runs the gamut. And the thing is, they all are just trying to stay alive, man. They're just trying to hold it, and they hold each other up. I get texts all day long, check on so-and-so. Don't tell them I told you. They text me screenshots of what's happening on Snapchat. I'm like, oh, thank you, But they want to hold one another up. They are so supportive of their peers. And of course, there's these one-off, so-and-so, blah, 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 kiss my boyfriend. Well, go figure that. I told you not to do that. And, but long story short, they hold each other up and they look out for each other. And in a traditional setting, that's called snitching or tattling or whatever it is. But in ours, it's called saving someone's life. Because you don't know when that last day is going to happen. There was a time during that year, that 2017, 2018, where they were videotaping, and we do this thing called group up every day. At 10:30, the students go to 2 classes, then we kind of meet as a group, We talk about exemplars, we do shout outs for students, we sometimes will do readings or just anything academic or social exemplars. And we share anything that's coming up, anything that they need to know. And if you watch the episode, you'll see that during one of our group ups, I had to tell that one of our students, Sean, had passed away. And I had to do that 7 times that year when they were videotaping. 7 group ups. I had kids were like, I'm not going to group up anymore. No more group up. We're not doing it. Because I kept having to walk in and be like, okay, so-and-so who graduated 3 years ago died of an overdose. I mean, this was just, it was tragic. And so we do this thing called group up every day where students support each other and they, you know, they can tell their story and they can be like, I had a really tough night, or I had 6 months sober. It's just a place where you come together as a community. But also with the good comes the really tragic. And so they know what happens if we don't give 100% for them. And they feel that. So they know the outcomes. Yes?
Speaking of 100%, how do you handle electronic devices?
I don't. Sometimes they use this. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm in an anxiety-ridden place and I'm by myself, I'll just pick up my phone and pretend I'm doing something because I don't want people to see me. You know what I mean? Like, I think we're so dependent on technology. And with children, I mean, obviously it causes a lot of distress if they're in the middle of something and they're trying to navigate themselves. But we can tell that. So we do something where we have a pulse oximeter. Like, so if a student is like dysregulated and they don't know they're dysregulated, they'll go and put this pulse oximeter on. We're like, well, your heart rate's like 110. Your resting heart rate's at 71. They don't even know they're dysregulated because of this. So that'll be a cue for me to be like, hey, just put your phone down. I never touch their phones. Put your phone down. Take 5 minutes. Let's do some deep breathing. Let's do a meditation. I would love to, but you know what? We used to take their phones. And that's so because technology has changed everything. I mean, I used to be able to teach at a board with chalk. Like, you know what I mean? And then this came along and they're like, oh, by the way, there's a better YouTube video than you could ever do. And I'm like, you're probably right. So it's changed the way we teach. It's changed everything. But they also depend on this to bring themselves back too, you know? So we just kind of meet them where they are. But yeah, we used to take their phones, but then they would have like burner phones. They bring in fake phones. And I'm like, I just can't with you. So we just go like, you know, in the middle of a group, they have to put their phones down. When they're in class, they put their phones down. But sometimes they'll pick them up and we'll be like, hey, you know, but we don't collect them. But that's a really good question because technology. I mean, kids can get drugs to my school faster than I can get a pizza. I mean, it's just, that's what technology is. Yeah.
Are the kids in all different spectrum of some sober, some still using, some transitioning, and how do you support all those different needs?
That's a good question. So what she was asking is, so all students are in every phase of recovery that you can possibly imagine. Every student has something called a recovery plan. And in this recovery plan, they say, you know, these are the substances I'm going to continue to use. Once again, they go home at 3. So I don't have control over what happens when they go back to that same place on that same block where they were sexually abused or where their mom or dad beat them. You know, I can't change that. And as an adult, right, we can do CBT, DBT, we can get ourselves out of this, we can move away from places that have caused us harm. But as children, we send them right back to that same place. So I don't know what's going to keep them triggered and impact the way that I can get them to whatever we perceive recovery is. I believe a person is in recovery when they're saying recovery. I don't get to choose what your recovery path looks like. Abstinence for me is not recovery. It's a self-directed life. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your family? Are you making better choices? Are you employable? Are you going to church? What are you doing in the community? For me, that's recovery. I think every one of us is in some phase of recovery, right? So I think this whole structure of abstinence-based recovery is not, do that at our school. So they have a recovery plan. And as long as their parent or guardian, whoever they live with, knows, hey, this is what they've identified that their recovery plan is going to look like. We do drug testing. We keep them accountable. We have all these other ways. But once again, they go home at 3 o'clock. So we have students that have 2 years of recovery, abstinence-based recovery. And they come in and they're like, thank God I am not doing that. They see the students who are still using and they don't want to go back there. And then the students who are struggling see the ones who aren't and go like, that could be. And if you say to every single one of my students, will you be completely abstinent at some point in your life? They're like, oh yeah, just not now. Every single one of them sees themselves in a place that's more stable, right? And what we would call recovery. They see that. but they just can't get there now. But yeah, that's a good, but they support each other. Yeah.
Is there any difference on the kids that come in from being only child to having several siblings?
It depends on whether that person was adopted or not, because that's also, so what you asked was if they're a part of a sibling group, are their chances of being worse or better different? I don't really see that. I do see we do have more students who have been adopted. I think that's a higher risk factor for substance use. I haven't done the research, but I'm guessing there is something that's in there about identity that does impact the way that they think, and they I mean, it's all self-medicating. You said it right from the beginning. It's about them trying to not have to hold all of that stress and all of that identity, and it's a lot. And you know what? Getting high is the one thing that makes them feel better. And then I'm like, oh, you can't do that anymore. And they're like, what? So I don't know if you've seen anybody under the influence. I work with Hand Up in a needle exchange up in Dover, New Hampshire, and I see these beautiful people impacted so greatly by what is inside of them. And I just want to get in and be like, oh, how can we help you? But you don't. You just treat them with dignity and you give them what they need and hope that something is going to go like, okay, no, I'm ready to put it down. But I mean, these people, they've given up their homes, they've given up their families, they've given up their children, and that's how strong addiction is. I almost wish that I could go to every legislator in the United States and beyond and just inject them with what it feels like to be addicted for a week, and then say like, okay, now don't put everything you have towards helping addiction, because you can't, it's not, right? You're struggling so badly. The only option you have is to use a substance that finally takes away that pain. Like, that's what addiction is. And I don't think people who are making policy changes at this federal level are understanding, like on the ground, these children, 107,000 people died of a fentanyl overdose. 288,000 died of an alcohol-related disorder. We are 50% higher suicide rate for adolescents. Like, where are they, right? Where are the people coming to help us on the ground? I don't see them. Department of Public Health has been great. They throw money at us to help do peer mentoring, and Department of Education gives us some money, and districts still don't know what they're doing, but I don't want to go there. Some districts are good. But yeah, I don't see any difference between a sibling group and a single child.
Sure. Is there a place for yourself and your staff, times of self-care support?
So anytime, yeah, we do this thing called tapping out. And so we know each other really well. A lot of my staff have been there from the beginning. We're so mission driven. And we do long walks together. We do, yoga, meditation outside of school. We definitely find time every day between 3 and 3:15 to kind of debrief the day, figure out what people need. And if I see somebody is really struggling, like in a short with a student, I'll just be like, tap out, see if go home for the day. We'll cover your classes. And it's never like a judgment call. They're like, oh, thank God. It's never like, no, I'll do better. It's like, I see you, go, take a day, do whatever you need to do, come back tomorrow, all good. And so we definitely look out for each other. As far as formalizing like a self-care plan, I really encourage a lot of my staff now take walks on the rail trail in Danvers before school, or we take students outside all the time because we realize like getting outside is so healthy for them, and they just don't. So, we do that with them as well. But I encourage self-care as much as I can. I always encourage getting your own therapist, trying to figure out what that balance is for them. Yeah.
Is the medical model, just one more question, is the medical model becoming more accepted in Massachusetts in terms of how...
Like medically assisted therapies?
Yeah. And that is seen not as a...
It depends on where you are. In some circles, yes. In some circles, no. I think that's a tough one. I think what she was saying is this is a medical model. So if you have depression and you take something for your depression or anxiety, you take something for depression, sometimes you go into a certain recovery group and they're like, you can't take medication because you're not sober if you're taking medication. And so for me, I go to a doctor and not somebody else when I need medication. I don't go to a sponsor for medication. So I hope that people are coming along to that. I have most of my, I have to say 3/4 of my staff are in a recovery group and are like, oh, this is really hard for me to accept this. But then after time, they're like, oh, no, I get it. So I think it's a mind shift. Yeah. Yes.
After graduation, what happens? What supports do the students have?
That's a great question. They never stop texting me. Oh my gosh. No, we did start something called Recovery in Action a couple years ago. So with that MTV thing, we did get some money that went to my school. I never even got a coffee from them. Went to my school, and so what we're doing is we're training our seniors to become recovery coaches. So every April before they graduate, we offer a $5,000 recovery coach training for any of our seniors that would like to participate in that. So now we have kind of a cadre of people who are recovery coaches who can work with the upcoming seniors, because we see that transition is a really tough transition. So we have some of our former graduates who now are recovery coaches for those seniors if they need support. Yeah. Yes.
It's kind of a two-part question, I guess. What do you need, and what can you do?
So, thank you. Like that's the stuff that makes me cry. I can sit up here and talk about all that, and I'm like, really, you're gonna help? The cavalry has come. What do I need? What do my students need? Just, I always say when I work with churches, I want to get them out of the basements and into the chapel, right? Like I want to have them see what it feels like to be a part of a community where people support each other and like all around. I do work with another church here in Beverly, and Second Congregational Church, and I started working with them about 14 years ago. And I started working with them because Rosie, she was Mary Kay something, and I had touch base, and she's like, I want to come do makeup for your girls for the prom. And I was like, okay. And so she came into makeup, she's like, oh my gosh, my church has to know what's going on with you guys. So I started meeting with her minister, and we started bringing the kids over there, and it was great. But then I think it changes, right? So I think their preacher, minister changed a couple times over, and they're great. We have our graduation there every year, but I think we used to have a lot more support, and they do, and they make Thanksgiving dinner for us. I mean, you could see in the video that's what we do. We break bread with them. I would love to see that everywhere. Like I would love for the students to have an option to say like, hey, you know what? We're going to come 1 week, and we're going to see what it's like here at this Episcopalian church, and what do you do here, and what do you do for the community, and have them see you all who are boots on the ground willing to help them versus I think just a different story. And I had a woman who today said, I want to help, and I was like, oh, you like music? Oh, look at that. Like we'll figure it out. I don't have the answer to that of what I need. I mean, we're fully funded. It's not that that's a thing. I just need them to feel loved, more love, more. I mean, this group of women that kind of embraced our students still keep in touch with a lot of my graduates and like send them cards, and like that goes a really long way. And you know what's really good? This is what we can do. We can share our ugly stories. This is what I say to them. Like, Christmas sucks, okay? Because Christmas is stressful. And then we all get these pictures with these beautiful, shining children. And it makes us feel like we're doing something wrong. And for me, just personally, it's just stressful. It's a stressful time of the year. My kids are everywhere. I have older kids now. But I used to say, like, I had this one Christmas card where my children look like they are angels. They look, I think they were like 10 and 8 and 4, and the dog, it was the perfect card. And I could tell you what was happening 5 minutes before I took that. I was swearing, and I was like, take that picture, and they're like, there it was. Like, it was pure chaos. Like, the dog was puking, the kids were killing each other. Like, the Christmas tree went down after that. Like, it was just pure chaos. But yet, I sent that card out, and I was like, I need to flip the script on this one. So the next year, I sent a card out with the kids killing each other. And I was like, this is the reality, of my life. So here we go. So I think it's just sharing those stories and not having people think like you're gonna walk into church and everyone's perfect. We're not. We're not perfect. We are so imperfect. And like the perception that everyone goes to church is like, we need to we need to debunk that myth. Like, people need to see us for who we are, and that we have our own challenges, and we have our own ugly, and we need to share that ugly. And yeah, I don't know if that answered anything, but yeah, just more showing up. Call me sometime. Check in on me. Anybody else? Yes.
Michelle, you're too busy, overwhelmed, and thank you for tapping out this morning and coming here. But I'm wondering, do you, or is there someone else that knows what's going on in Hamilton region, Manchester, Essex? Last Thursday, through Jamie Knudsen and another friend of mine in that school, I know that there's a high drug problem among the kids. What's going on in the schools that are close to you?
That's everywhere. That's everywhere across the United States. I do speaking everywhere, and that's the question. And so my Positive Alternatives to Student Suspension program, I started it 4 years ago, and it's at capacity every single day down at the McPherson Center in Beverly. They just started one on the Cape. They started one in Haverhill. They're starting one. I think we need to create these spaces with community partners to be able to identify students outside of school, because as soon as they go into school and they say, I think I'm smoking too much weed, you're going to lose your sports. People are going to look down on you. You can't have those conversations in schools. It's not safe, because people are going to judge you, and it's because of stigma and shame. These kids are going to keep it out of school. However, if we build spaces, build it here, I don't care, build it somewhere that kids can come and have these honest conversations, because these are HIPAA-protected conversations. You don't have to file a 51A unless it's imminent risk, right? So like, people can have conversations, but they're afraid to have those conversations in schools because they're afraid DCF is going to show up at their doorstep. And sometimes that might be the case, but most of the times they just need a place to dump their bucket. So that's why I just think, because you have adherence to these policies, these archaic, horrible policies, you can't really get in there. I started a program about 10 years ago. It's called I Can Help. And it's about training people in our school systems to be those conduits, right? To put a sticker up that says I can help. I would train them 8 hours, motivational interviewing, stages of change, blah, 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 blah. How to work with kids, how to discuss things with kids, what mandated reporting is. And you know what, I would go to these trainings and they were like, oh, we can't do that. Because as soon as we have this conversation, then we have to tell the so-and-so, and the so-and-so is gonna do this, and then it's gonna be like policies. And so I was so frustrated by that I ran for my school board. And then I was a school board member for 4 years before I pulled almost all my hair out, and now I'm a city councilor for the past 6. But like, now I can tell the school board what to do. So yeah, it's about policy change. It's about somebody standing up and saying, this homework policy, are you kidding me right now? We have a homework policy still? That's ridiculous, because these kids should be on competency-based education. These children know what you're talking about, and because they have to do some random extra math problems, they're gonna fail. Because they don't have this, you know who does well with a homework? Are people that have intact parents. Parents that sit down with them and say, it's time to do homework, here's your cookies, here's your milk. The kids who need that support the most don't get that. And so therefore they're gonna keep falling through the cracks, right? And those are the ones who are gonna, it's gonna start in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. They're gonna start feeling less than, they're gonna start failing, that cycle's gonna start, and what are they gonna do? Well, that guy over there looks like he's happy, he's smoking some weed, I'm gonna go over there. Like, that's when it starts. Like, we make this, we created this, right? And so I just kind of feel like until education figures out, like, we need to give them more when you think they need less. They're not bad, they're sick. They're not bad, they're bored. They're not bad, they need support. And these kids don't get it. Yeah.
2 questions. Number 1, what drug are you worried most about? And number 2, I'm very naive about fentanyl. Do they know that they're getting that, or are they getting it by accident? Is it easy access?
I need to come back and give a whole 1-hour discussion on that. So my students typically know. So what fentanyl right now it's pervasive. It's in every drug. It's in the meth. It's in the, there's no longer heroin. They're saying it's in weed. I don't know. I heard it from the Beverly Police that it actually was. I don't know. But they're pressing it into its pill form, right? Students are looking for Percocets or Vicodin or something like that, Xanax. And so what they're doing is they have these pill presses, and so they put it in with all these and the kids get more addicted. But my students know You want a horrifying story? So I had a student who was shooting fentanyl, and he overdosed. And he was with another student, not my student, another young person. And that young person texted me and said, so-and-so just overdosed. So I called the parent, and that person picked up his needle. And he was like, I had to do it myself. So he went ahead and shot him, like, knowing it just knocked out his friend who just overdosed. They ended up both living. But like, that's how strong addiction is. Like, they look at that and they're like, oh, that must have been really good. Let's do that, you know? So I just think that that's what addiction is. So that's fentanyl. Fentanyl is everywhere. I don't know how to eradicate it. I just have to live with it. We do a lot of drug testing. What was your other question?
Well, which one are you worried about the most, or is there like gateway drugs?
All of it. I mean, alcohol, I think the pervasive use of alcohol and how the acceptance of it is just, they're like, no, all I do is drink. I'm like, but how much are you drinking? And like, oh, just, you know, like a fifth on a Friday. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. You know, I think that in our society, it's so accepting. So I'm afraid of alcohol. Some students, marijuana is really changing the structure of their brains. And so if they already have a pre-existing, you know, anxiety, depression disorder, the cannabinoid region of the brain it's so susceptible to blocking out all the other receptors. So you're not going to make the dopamine and the serotonin and all those really good neurotransmitters you need to make to feel happy. It's going to be blocking some of those. And so I just kind of feel like, you know, prolonged use, excessive use. But is there acceptable use? I don't know. I think that's such an individual, like, if it, you know, do I want to see a kid on Seroquel or take a gummy at night? That's just up to you all, you know? Yeah.
So, I used to be youth minister around here, and also myself, in terms of bringing in Jesus and God into the conversation, I learned both through the high school girl kids that I worked with, but also my own depression and my own anxiety, my own loss, and therefore drinking too much or whatever it was. That a really important thing that I think AA comes out to, but that doesn't do, is finding a calling, a vocation, a purpose to live that somehow rises you above that. I don't want to be stoned all day because I get to be a plumber, or I love doing this. Is there anything I'm thinking practically that maybe a matchup with a child who goes and is with an adult in the community that does something that they're excited about? Because when I watched in addiction circles, which I've been in, you know, that high is so soothing that something else that makes you high. You know, and to me the closest thing is finding out Psalm 139, what God wove you in your mother's womb, knew the days before you, what you would be and who you would, and what you would do. So that's just an idea. Do you match them vocationally and finding their sense of uniqueness and what they're made for?
That is what I try to do every day. Yes, and yes. I mean, are there a lot of people out there that want to work with my students to bring them through, because they tend to be, you know, maybe a little foul-mouthed or whatever. They're just, they're tattooed and but I would love to have people in the community who want to mentor my students and want to, you know, people who work at a car dealership. I have a student who really wants to work at a car dealership, and because he has tattoos, he can't get a job at a car dealership. And so I think that would be great to set up, you know, some group of adults who want to mentor students who struggle with addiction. I mean, I know that can go far beyond just my school. That's like schools in general. It's finding a way to get a self-directed life. That's the biggest high ever, right? Is being independent, being able to buy your own car, pay your own insurance, pay your own cell phone. Like, those are the things that are going to build that child up, those people up, to feel like, you know, they can get past this. I 100% agree with you, and thank you for that description.
Thank you,
Oh, my pleasure.
I just feel like I have to do this I've been asked. Would you take a seat and
Sure.
We just want to hug you. And so we do thank you. Let's give that. This is for you, this is for your staff, this is for the kids. And could we
all pray now? I'm not going to pray, but could we all pray? Just let's pray for Michelle, because she is working with these kids and loving on each one of them that comes in there. She has got a staff to contribute, that she's got to monitor, give them a break, and she's got people like us to talk to. And she's got a lot of stuff that goes on as an administrator that we don't even understand. So can we all just pray for her? And can we go on to pray for her staff? These 14, 15, whatever it is, but these beautiful people, many of whom have had addictions themselves, some who haven't, but they're in training, and they're going in and facing this onslaught of kids that are huge holes that need to be filled with love each day. Let's pray for that staff. And then for the beautiful kids that will be coming in there tomorrow. Let's pray for them. They're so different. They're so needy. They're so beautiful. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Michelle, so much.